Welcome back, Hacker. Today we are going to be talking about images. This is going to be a multi-series tutorial. Today we're going to talk about images and specifically the image tag. But first we need to talk about different types of images because not all images are made the same way. So you see on my screen here that I have a grid. What we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about two different types of image categories. One is called a rasterized image and the other one is called a vector image. So on the screen here, this represents a rasterized image. What a rasterized image is a fancy way to say is an image that is painted by numbers. So as I see here on this screen, or as I'm creating this, you'll notice that I'm starting to create a kind of a circle. And what I'm doing is I'm painting in each of these dots. So imagine that each of these dots is what they call a pixel. A pixel is just a dot for a grid. And what it allows you to do is the computer paints by numbers essentially and creates an image. In this case, I'm creating a very terrible smiley face. This is a rasterized image. The image saves information about each individual square. So it'll say that this image is blank, this image has yellow, 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 blank, yellow, yellow, black, yellow, black, and it goes on and so on and so forth. And it saves that information as a file. This is a rasterized image file. The other type of image out there is called a vector file. A vector file is an image not painted by numbers like this, but an image that is created using a giant equation. The best example of a vector file would be logos. A lot of logos out there are created using vector files. The reason why is because a vector file is really good at creating sort of 2D art, but it's not really good at capturing a life moment. For example, it can't capture me taking an image with my wife or a pretty sunset, right? It's going to be more of a graphic design. So the advantage of a vector file is that you can make it larger and smaller, where a rasterized file, you can capture more quality of life, but then what ends up happening is when you save it, you can't make it as large and small. So let's show an example of this. So here we have a PNG file. A PNG file is actually a rasterized file. It's a type of rasterized file. So when I go ahead, I'm going to grab this image of this smiley face and I'm going to transform it, and then I'm going to make it really, really big. I'm going to make it super, super big. Let's try to make this big in Photoshop. I'm going to hit enter and then I'm going to zoom in. You'll see as I zoom in that this line becomes less crisp. It's not as crisp. It's starting to become what they call pixelated. It's because we're taking something that shouldn't be as large and we're making it bigger, right? It can't stretch that far. Where a vector image, like this one, this is an SVG file. As I zoom in, you'll notice that it's crisper, right? Look how crisp this is especially in the middle over here. So the edges are kind of a little bit less, but the middle of it is very nice and crisp. So a SVG file, it's an image that has been created through a equation. It allows it to be created bigger and smaller. This is why images of logos, a graphic designer will create it in Adobe Illustrator usually, and this allows them to make it larger and smaller. So if they want to blow up that logo to be on a billboard, it's easy to do. Now, with that being said, there are different types of rasterized images. Again, rasterized images are that paint by number. And let's go over a couple of these. So one type of image that is out there is called a GIF. A GIF image allows you, so as I scroll over this screen here, you'll see that there's this grid behind it. That means that it's transparent. And we'll talk a little bit about transparency between these different image types. So an image that is a GIF or GIF, positives of it is that it allows you to have a transparent background, meaning that if I put this on a different background, like let's say I have a green background, I'm going to see this smiley face and there's not going to be a box around it. It's just going to be nice on top of it. And we'll show an example of that in a couple minutes, so bear with me. So a GIF allows you to have a transparent background and it also allows you to do animation. The problem with the GIF though is that they have to be very small and they don't allow as many types of colors. So it limits you on the detail in some regards because a GIF is trying to be really small. A JPEG image that we see here, a JPEG image, hover over it, notice that the background doesn't change at all. A JPEG image is an image file that is a rasterized image file, but it requires a background. So see this image here. We have transparent, And then we have a white background. So what happens is if I save it as a GIF or a JPEG, sorry, if I save an image as a JPEG, it's going to try to compress it and make it into have a background. The reason why it does that is because JPEGs are really good at creating images with lots of information, but keeping it smaller. So you will use a lot of times a JPEG image on your site, especially if it's an image of a person or a group of people or a place. JPEG images are really great because it can be compressed to be smaller. Now, there is another type of image, that's a rasterized image, that we use a lot in development, which is a PNG file. A PNG file is a lot like a JPEG image, but it allows you to have that transparent background. Now, one disadvantage of a PNG file is it's going to be a lot larger than a JPEG file because it has that additional background. There's also some additional properties that a PNG image has, meaning that you can save a PNG image over and over again and it's not going to become all pixelated, where a JPEG, if you save a JPEG image over and over again for a couple hundred times, it's going to slightly over time degrade and become more pixelated. But that's just, that's master level stuff there. We're not there yet, right? So the next image that you'll find, those are rasterized images. The next type of image that you'll run into a lot is an SVG image. An SVG image is, again, it is that image that is being created with a math equation, and it allows us to create something larger and smaller. So with all that said, let's go ahead and let's teach you how to use an image tag in CodePen. So that way you can play around with some of these images and you can really see the difference. So what I'm going to do for this tutorial is I want you to go to Wikimedia Commons. So it's going to be commons.wikimedia.org. And this is going to give you a site where you can do some searches for some images. So in my case, I'm going to search for smiley face here. And then when you are working on your challenge later on, I'm going to have you select this button here that says type. And I'm going to have you select a PNG image, a GIF image, and a JPEG image. And I want you to try these different types because I want you to see the differences between them. And I'm going to show you on the screen right here as we're doing this tutorial together. But that's going to be what you're going to need to use for your challenge later on. All right, so let's jump into it. So I'm going to have open here. I'm going to have a CodePen. And let's go back. Actually, let's go back to here. This is our CodePen. I'm going to remove all of this stuff. And we're going to create it from scratch. Okay, so let me break this down as well. All right, so we have a blank CodePen for images. So first things first is what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you how to create an image appear on your page. So what we're going to use is we're going to use an HTML tag, and it's going to be an image. Then we're going to use the attribute of SRC. So SRC is just one of those things that you're going to need to memorize. It's a lot like href or an aref. So this is how in an anchor tag, how the href points to the file or the place that you're wanting to go. The SRC is pointing to the source image that you're wanting to pull and show on this page. Then you'll notice though that I have a space and then I have Matt Damon stopping, right? So images are actually what we call a self-closing tag. Now, today in web development, you can actually get away with this. But back in the day when I first started, if you didn't have a slash like this, the browser didn't like you very much. So I have I've been taught to always put the slash in a self-closing slash or a self-closing tag. So a self-closing tag, what that means is in this case, a paragraph, this is opening and then there's something in the middle and then this is closing. A self-closing is saying that all the information we need about this image is contained right in this image. There's not going to be an image like this with some information here. Like that doesn't exist because when we have the image showing on the page, that's it. That's all we need. We just need the image to show. So that's why it is self-closing. Like that. All right, so here we have our beginning, what we're creating, and then we have our attribute of our source and what we're equaling it to. We're going to equal it to a location. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to here and I'm going to first grab this JPEG or this GIF file. So I'm going to click on use this web file and then I'm going to click on this image here. I'm going to copy it and then I'm going to paste it here. Now these images will be in the description if you want to link to them directly, but this is that. So now you'll see that it loads on this page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some CSS to make this smaller. So I'm going to say image. I'm going to select all images. I'm going to say width of 100 pixels. And that's going to reduce the size of it. Now you'll see that I have the white background, but I want to display I wanted to show, like you saw on the screen before, that this actually has some transparency behind it. So if I show that green, you'll notice that it goes all the way through. I don't have a white border around it. All right, perfect. So now let's go ahead and let's try this with some other image types. I have this image of the JPEG right here of this smiley face. I'm gonna click use this, select this here. I'm gonna go to image src equals. I'm gonna paste it in here. I'm gonna self-close it. So now you can see on this one, there is a white background. That's again because a JPEG is trying to be as small as possible. And so it's going to make it so we don't have the transparency, which adds more information. Now we have our next one, which is our SVG file. This is going to be really good for logos. This is a small image type, but it's going to always be this type of clip art type of deal, graphic design type of art. And you can see here that's nice and crisp, and that we don't have we don't have any white background behind it. And then we're going to go into our PNG, show one more time this here, and we're going to self-close this. So now we have the different image types. So again, to recall, GIF or GIF, animation, smaller, JPEG, lifelike, but is going to have a background. A SVG for logos, very good for logos, smaller. And then we have a PNG, which a PNG is going to have a transparency, and it's going to make it so that it doesn't, as you keep saving over and over again, it's not going to ruin the image, which is a great thing as well. Now we're almost done, but I want to show you one more thing, and this is very important, is that we have these images. Now we're not done with creating our code yet. We need to add another attribute. And our attribute that we're going to use is we're going to use alt. So alt is alternative text or alternative. Usually you'll see this, like if a page doesn't load, you'll have a box. So sometimes if like your internet goes down, you'll have a box, and then you'll have an X through that box. And then it will say in the corner, it'll say some words. And what those words are is it's describing what the image is supposed to be. And those words come from this alt. So that would be, so for example here, I'm going to describe this image that's going to say smiley face animation. Now that's not the only reason why you should use an alt tag. There's actually a much more important reason. And the much more important reason is ADA compliancy. So we want our websites to be usable by anyone. And there are people out there that have a disability when it comes to sight. And sometimes it's hard for them to see. So what they have on their computer is when they hover over an image, they might not be able to tell what an image is, but the computer will actually read out loud whatever is in the alt tag. And it'll say smiley face animation. So it's describing to the individual that has a hard time seeing what the image is about to them so they can understand and know how to interact with the site. It is very important to have alt tags. And actually in some countries, they're making it illegal to have a site that is not in the United States ADA compliant. ADA compliancy is United States terminology for it, but in the states you need to know that there is legislation in certain states that are coming down the pipeline, and this is something that you need to do, is create ADA compliancy. It's good for you. Actually, Google likes it when you do this as well, so if you have to be selfish, think about that it might help you when it comes to ranking on Google. But ADA compliance in the states is important, and you need to do this, and this is through alt tags. The alt tag is going to describe meaningfully what this image is about. Now there are some cases where you don't have to have an alt tag. Let's say if you have an image that is like a border, a very fancy border between two sections of the site, you don't have to have an alt tag for that one because it's not actually important to understanding the document and what is going on in the document. Or a smiley face, it might be very important to understand that this is a smiley face. So that is again going to be an alt tag. So alt equals, and then you have the attribute right here. And that's the basics for creating an image. Now, one thing I want to before we go is leave you with is that when you are using images, you need to be very careful, because images, you may or may not know, but people make livings off of creating images, graphic designers, photographers. Do not put an image on your website that you do not have the rights for. I'll repeat that again. Do not put an image on the site that you do not have the rights for. Meaning, If you haven't paid for it, or if you haven't given kudos for it, so I'm going to go ahead and give kudos to all these individuals. I'm going to show the arbitration right here. There. These are all the individuals that have created these images. Some sites will let you use images for free, but you need to reference, hey, these are the individuals that created this for it. Or you need to have paid it. Now there are some sites out there that we can go over later on that have royalty-free images that you can use on, or Creative Commons images that you can use in production. But again, assume that someone created that image and assume that you need to pay someone for that image. Don't just put images on your site and claim that they're yours. That's very important. You get in lots of trouble for it. All right, so now that all being said, for this challenge, what you're going to do is you're going to go to commons.wikimedia.org and you're going to search for, this should say 4 smiley faces. And then you're going to find them. It should be a PNG with a transparent background, an SVG, a JPEG, and a GIF. Then in CodePen, what I want you to do is I want you to change the background to blue. In the main tag, so you're going to add a main tag. You are going to add your 4 images, and then you're going to make sure that your images have an alt tag. Okay? Then once you're done, so you should at the end of it have something that looks somewhat like this. Hint is that as well is if you have an issue when it comes to the sizing, don't be afraid to do what I did here, which was the image and then set a image width to 100 pixels, or let's say 200 pixels, so you can see it better. But by the end of this, you should have a section or a main tag that has a blue background with 4 images inside of it. It should look something like this. And again, what you're going to do is repetition is key. Repetition is the key to learning. You're going to delete it all and then do it a second time. You don't need to find new images, but I want you to get that muscle memory down of creating these images. All right, I know that was a longer video, but you got this. Coding is not that hard, and keep moving forward, and I'll see you in the next video.